The first most important event that went on was migration. First, humans moved out of East Africa and into the regions that we see that developed agriculture, which had to happen before any of this started. Then the developments of fire and stone tools dramatically affect their lives because it made it easier for them to survive. Stone tools provided them ways to hunt and for protection. Fire provided them ways to cook their meat for protection and heat so they wouldn't die in the cold, and many more things. Then the development of agriculture came, which basically changed everything. They didn't have to be hunter-gatherers anymore. They could now settle down, which led to many different things in their societies. First one would be the development of patriarchy. Since people in the hunter-gatherer type society, well, not society, just families, the men would be the hunters and the women would be the gatherers. Since they both had equal jobs, they were both seen as equal. But in agriculture, the job is basically eliminated since you no longer have to forage for food. It's already planted. So patriarchy, where males are dominant, it begins to develop. Then the development of stratification. Since some people have the food and can produce it, they are rich. And some people who don't have the land or resources to produce the food, they would be poor. So you now have an upper class and a lower class. And other different types of stratification occur just as jobs are differentiated in the society. Then there's the development of irrigation, which goes more along with agriculture because people need to water their crops. This also became a way for them to get water for themselves into their society from wherever they were getting it, which became an important part of their lives and societies. Then the development of states. Many people are together in one place and they need some sort of government with maybe laws so they don't hurt each other or do anything that was decreed morally wrong, which also led to the development of language because people would get together in one place and need to have a way to communicate with written, not only like spoken language, but written language, which also leads to records and law codes, which goes with the development of states. Also the development of architecture, not only just houses, but things like pyramids and ziggurats and other things like that, temples, which goes along with the development of religion, the 10th important thing to happen. People are together and sharing ideas, which spreads religions and allows people to develop their own beliefs. Next are 10 important people or groups of people. First, there are the hunter-gatherers. They hunt for their food and gather their food instead of having agriculture. This is before agriculture or really even pastoralism existed. Then the pastoralists came along and they domesticated animals, but they still moved around from place to place like the hunter-foragers. They just led their animals to graze in different fields, and that lifestyle also led to the development of technology. They developed and helped trade things like composite bows, iron weapons, and even chariots and the idea of horseback riding. So they were really very essential in coming up with ideas and then putting them out so that everyone could have those ideas. Then came the societies. So there were the Mesopotamians, who had the cuneiform, which was the form of language, ziggurats for architecture, and they also had Hammurabi's law code, which goes with their cuneiform or their language. Then the Mesoamericans, they had the big heads that went along with their religion, and then the Olmecs were about rubber, and they came up with a 30 days, like a number system based on 30, so like 30 days in a month, and then 365 days in a year. Then the Egyptians, they had pharaohs who they believed were like leaders that also had divine power. they had architecture, as you see in the pyramids, and then hieroglyphics, which are just symbols that represent letters or words that you can write with. So that goes with the development of language and the cuneiform with the Mesopotamians. Then the Indians, they had Dravidian and Aryan, those the migrations, and the had irrigation. There were also Africans, the Nile River Valley civilization, and that it had agriculture that flourished there. Andes, they had maize. Then they had communes, so people were together and contributing to society, and they also had a jaguar god that they worshipped. Then they had the Chinese, which had dynasties, and they had pictographs for a written language, strong irrigation, and of silk production. Then the Papua New Guinea people had pottery and shells, and they also had a lot of fishing. Then environmental, cultural, and political factors could include definitely agriculture is the biggest one because it allowed for all of these societies to form, basically. And it also caused the development of many different things and caused many different things to happen in each society, in all of the societies. First was the development of private property. So people would now see things as their own. Oh, it's their own. Like they had wealth now due to agriculture. And then that wealth was their own. They wouldn't share it with other people. And they actually had possessions and not, they wouldn't just have to move around. Since they had a sedentary lifestyle, they developed possessions and wealth, which was their own and they didn't want to give up or give away. Then the development of private land, that also came with a sedentary lifestyle. If you were a hunter-gatherer, you were moving around, so you couldn't claim all the land as your own. You would have to hunt and move. But with agriculture, that land, you would want it as your own so you could profit from it and you could live there. So people would like to think of it as private and as their own. Then the development of wealth, which goes along with private property. Once again, agriculture leads you to have a sedentary lifestyle. So you have things where they are and where you are, and you consider them to be yours. And once you accumulate a lot of them, you might have some wealth. Or once you make a lot of profit, you have wealth, and you'd like to think of that as your own, and not that you have to either share it and just that you have it. Then the patriarchy, because once again, when men and women were hunters and gatherers, their jobs were equal, but now due to agriculture, they're not. So women are seen as just less strong and less of everything. So the male becomes dominant, which leads to patriarchy. Then they also had population growth. Because they were in one place, they could focus on raising children, and those children would also grow and continue the society and maybe even help with agriculture, which they needed to keep having wealth and needed to maintain their lifestyle. And then the development of religion, because people were staying in the same place, they could trade ideas and they could develop religions and have rules for those things. The development of language, not oral language, but written language. People needed a way to communicate. And especially when the societies developed into city-states or just states with leaders, they needed some sort of laws, some sort of government to keep everything in order and to keep them in order. So they needed a language and a written language so that everyone could have the rules and understand them. Then there's the development of trade. There were multiple societies all sort of forming, and they could trade with each other to get what they need. So if one area didn't have something, they could trade with another area to get it so that everyone there could survive. And then there was cultural diffusion. So when people, each culture, they developed sort of a way of living, and they could, when they traded especially, they could sort of bring that to other regions and spread their own culture within other regions, which brought cultural diffusion. So those are the 10 most important people, places, and factors in the first time period.